This is the second video on views where we begin by briefly discussing the two ways of processing queries involving views to understand the impact on the performance that has. So view materialization involves processing of two queries. First, the query that defines the view, i.e. the one inside the view, is executed and a temporary view table is created. Then the actual user query is executed against the temporary view table. Clearly, the performance of such a process is degraded by the need to execute two queries. So view materialization is not preferred for transactional processing systems with frequent small retrieval and update queries. For data warehousing systems with relatively infrequent large-scale retrieval queries, view materialization is the preferred method. The materialized views need to be periodically refreshed, but because for data warehouse queries supporting strategic decision making, having up to speed data is not as critical as it is for day-to-day transaction processing system, the periodic refresh of materialized views is not as computationally expensive. View modification, on the other hand, combines the user-issued query with the query defining the view into a single query execution. This approach is preferred for transactional processing systems with frequent small retrieval and update queries, since it results in a much improved computational performance when compared with a view materialization approach. For the data warehousing systems with relatively infrequent large-scale retrieval queries, as was already discussed on a previous slide, view materialization is a better approach. So far, we have been working with read-only views, i.e. using only the select statement retrieving the information through the view. Updatable views are views that can be used with data modification statements such as insert, update, and delete. We start by discussing a single table updatable views through which the user can perform insert, update, and delete operations on the underlying base table. For the single table updatable views, there is a simple one-to-one correspondence between the rows in the view and the rows in the underlying base table. The rules associated with designing such views are simple as well. The view must contain the primary key of the base table, as well as all the required fields without default values. Optional fields do not have to be included in the view and will simply be left as nulls after an insert operation, or even if they were required but had default values, they will be inserted with those default values. The view's select statement cannot include distinct and group by keywords. Distinct because the presence of primary key guarantees the uniqueness of each row. Group by because even if the base table is a summary table, each of the rows have to be accessed and modified separately. So group by simply does not make sense. Back to our supporting database. We left all the fields except the primary keys and few foreign keys as optional. So now we need to pretend that, for example, employee last and first name, city, state, zip, and hire date, for example, are all required. And some of the other fields like phone, supervisor, rank, and salary are not. Although we will include some of these in our single table updatable view definition shortly. Okay, so you're going to switch to Toad and the sporting goods database. And we're going to use a notepad to open a blank MySQL 4_29 one TBL updatable view file. So I'm going to go switch over here, right click, and open it with notepad. Okay, so we're going to use the code at the bottom of the slide. Let me get back to the slide and notepad at the same time as before. Okay, to create a view that will only allow us to modify parts of the underlying employee table for employees from the state of Minnesota. We'll test it once we're done by right-clicking and selecting View Details in Toad. So create view mn_emp_update as select employee ID, last name, first name, city, state, zip code, hire date, supervisor, rank, and salary. Okay, from employee table where state is Minnesota. Okay, save this, select the view, copy it, go to Toad, open up an editor, paste it, and run it. Okay, there are only two employees from state of Minnesota, Pete and Caroline. Okay, switch back to presentation. Okay, so next what we're going to do is we're going to just review the already provided insert statement and notice that these optional quote-unquote supervisor rank and salary columns were left as null. That's what these three guys are. Okay, also notice that the query will run against the just defined Minnesota employee update view, okay, rather than the base employee table. Okay, so we'll go and into Notepad and we'll copy paste the insert into query into Toad, and hopefully it will run. Okay, we'll check the result by running or opening the EMP update to see that third recently just added employee without information for rank, supervisor, and salary. And close that and clear the code. Go back to the presentation. Now what we're going to do, we're going to update the newly added MN employee, the one I just showed, with certain supervisor rank and salary info given down here. Okay, so we're going to open the Notepad or switch back to Notepad. We're going to create an update query on mn underscore emp update view, where we're going to set supervisor to 61, rank to C as clerk, and then salary to 25,000 for employee with ID 98. I believe that was. Yes. I'm going to save that. I'm going to run that update query. Again, notice that the update query runs on the view rather than the underlying employee table. Okay, we're going to view the changes, 61 clerk and 25 grand. Okay, finally, we're going to delete the newly recently added Minnesota employee through the view by simply executing a delete query shown at the bottom of the slides. So switch to Notepad and type delete from MN employee update view where employee ID is 98. Okay. Now we should, before we do the deletion, we should point out that the underlying table is getting updated, right? So we should point out that employee table, if we go to the data and probably scroll to the bottom, has the recently added Joe Smith, right? He doesn't have a phone number because we didn't specify it. It doesn't have an address either, but it does have the supervisor 61, clerk, and 25 grand, right? So now, did I copy that view? I hopefully did, or the delete query, I should say, will remove it, right? And we can see that by just running the view. Okay, that's going to show us being back to those original two Minnesota employees, Pete and Caroline. And we should also be able to see that by looking at the employee table, where at the bottom we no longer have this employee 98. Okay, I'll clear this, switch back to the presentation, and discuss one of the potential problems with updatable views. Okay, so we'll consider the same two Minnesota employees by opening the view, right? So if you open the view, I just show that, right? So we have the Pete and, no, sorry, not the view, not the table, but the view. We have the Pete and Caroline right here, okay? So if we pick one of them, which I'm actually not going to do, I'm going to leave it up to you, and then create an update query that will change either Pete's or Caroline's state to say Ohio, OH, okay? This employee view, of course, disappear from the view because the view references only Minnesota employees, okay? So if we rerun this update query, and to reverse the action, in order to prevent this from happening, we need to add the with check option at the bottom of this view. So if we were to do all this, which I'm again skipping for the brevity, right, we would add at the bottom with check option, which would then prevent the change of whichever one of the two employees you picked, his or her state to Ohio. Okay, so you have to be careful with, but if the query that you are using on the view is modifying, okay, the criteria that is used in the view itself, that can create this kind of sort of problems and then inconsistencies. Okay, so I'm going to switch back to the presentation and